This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So already Shloshim Yom Koydem HaChag. So we're going to move on from the demons of last week. Put the demons in the closet, and we're going to speak about a Mishnah that we mentioned in the Haggada Shel Pesach, and one of the famous Mishnayos in Shas, the Mishnah of Rabbi Glatstein Azaria. If anybody wants to look at it inside, it's the Gemara. It's a Mishnah in Masechta Brachos, Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis. But I'm sure you all know it by heart. So the Mishnah says like this: we know there's a mitzvah every day of Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim. If you remember, Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. We certainly do that during the day. The shaila is that a mitzvah that we should be Mekayim at night as well. So the Mishnah begins. You want to look at Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis on the bottom of the page. Maskirin Yitzias Mitzrayim Baleilos. We're supposed to mention Yitzias Mitzrayim at night as well. Okay. However, that's not necessarily a definitive statement. Says Gemara, Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Azaria. Rabbi Elazar ben Azaria says, Harei ani kiven shivim shana. I am as if I'm 70 years old. I was never zoicha to say Yitzias Mitzrayim at night. Now some of us learn like this. Well, what does it mean he's never zoicha? He fell asleep every night before he got a chance to say the third Parsha. The Mefarshim say a lashon of zikoi, minatseach. He was never successful in being victorious over the other opinion. The other opinion is, you're not supposed to say Yitzias Mitzrayim at night. So it says Rabbi Azaria, I always did, but I was never victorious in my arguments over the other shita. Ad shedrasha ben Zayma, until Ben Zayma came up with the following drasha. Shenemar, the pasuk says in Parshas Bay, Laman tizgar es yom tzeischa me'eretz Mitzrayim, kol yemei chayecha. In order that you remember the day you left Mitzrayim, all the days of your life. So obviously the word koil is extra. It could have said yemei chayecha, the days of your life. Why does it say all the days of your life? Says the Mishnah, yemei chayecha hayamim. When it says to remember Yitzias Mitzrayim, the days of your life, that refers to the days. Kol yemei chayecha, what does the extra kol include? Haleilos, the night. That not only do you have to remember Yitzias Mitzrayim during the day, you have to remember Yitzias Mitzrayim in the nighttime as well. That is the drasha of Ben Zayma, and that is the position of Rabbi Elazar ben Azaria.
It's in the Haggada, yeah.
That's in the Haggada. The Haggada got it from the Mishnah. The Mishnah came first. But Chachamim oimrim, yemei chayecha olam hazeh. Chachamim argue. Chachamim seem to say that koil does not include the night. Yemei chayecha refers to this world. Koil, lahavi limois hamashiach. Koil includes not the nighttime, but rather when Mashiach comes. That even when Mashiach comes, we will have to remember Yitzias Mitzrayim. That's a very strange thing. You need a pasuk to tell you that we're going to have to be Mekayim a mitzvah when Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, nothing's going to be different, right? We pasuk like Shmuel, Ein bein olam hazeh limois hamashiach elo shibud malchios bolvad. People think it's going to be some kind of supernatural existence. It's life as usual. No difference at all. The only difference is you're not subject to the government. So why would you need a pasuk to say that you'll have to be mekayim a mitzvah when Mashiach comes? All the mitzvahs ain't batelos lost to lava. Everybody knows there's a rule. The mitzvahs are not batal. Why would you need a pasuk to include the mitzvahs because it's limay samshach? What I want to focus on first is Rabbi Elazar ben Azaria. He says, Harei ani kiven shivim shana. I am as if I'm 70 years old. Obviously, he wasn't 70 years old. If he was 70 years old, he would say, Harei ani ben shivim shana. He says, kiven shivim shana. I'm as if I'm 70 years old. Actually, we know, we're going to see in the Gemara later on, that Rabbi Elazar ben Azaria was quite a young man at the time. He was 18 years old. But he's saying, I'm as if I'm 70. What does that mean? Why is he as if he's 70? He wasn't a rabbi in the 5 towns. He was a rabbi in Bavel. Why is he as if he's 70 years old? So, we look in the Rambam. The Rambam says, you have in the back, take a look in the back of your Gemara. The Rambam in Parsha Mishnayos, the Rambam says a very unusual pshat in the old age of Rabbi Elazar ben Azaria. Let's see where it is here in this. Usually the Parsha Rambam is after the Rosh. But you guys have to be on your game because usually I'll make a joke with a straight face. So you gotta be ready, you know? Okay. Where's the Rambam in the Parsha Mishnayos? In my Gemara. Where did it go? The Rambam, let me tell you what the Rambam says. Not before the Rush. It's on Daf. It's on Daf in the back. Daf Nun Vav Amud Beis. It's right after the Rush, after Klalei Talmud. See, in brachas they have different things in it. The Rambam says like this: V'ula ma'ashamar v'laz ben Azaria harei ani kvem shim shana v'lo yamar ben shivim shana ki lo haya ben shivim. He wasn't 70. Elazar liyamim, he was very young. But v'hayamar b'lashanos, he learned a lot. V'lo moed, and he learned a lot of Gemara. V'likoysim v'layla, and he learned Chumash. In other words, he learned Chumash, he learned Mishnah, he learned Gemara all day and all night. Yom v'layla ad asher tashash koichai, until his strength waned. V'nizrukaba seva, and old age jumped on him. V'chazar kazakin ben shimshan. In other words, it was a very stressful life. When a person is involved in learning is not easy. It's not learning. You sit back in a hammock and you drink lemonade. No. Learning saps you of energy. Learning saps you of all your strength. So Elazar ben Azaria was such a masmid, was such a Talmud Chacham. He really aged 52 years in the 18 years on this world. And it was like a self-induced old age, like the Gemara says. In other words, what he's saying is, even though I'm a young man, it's as if I'm 70 years old. It's a very problematic Rambam. Why? What's the Rambam saying? The Rambam's saying that Elazar ben Azaria naturally looked like he was 70 years old. What? Everybody knows, maybe, I don't say this lightly, maybe the most famous Gemara in Shas. It's the famous story of Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. And Rabbi Gamliel had a certain principle of Nahoig Nesiyascha Barama, where he acted in a very authoritarian manner, where he needed to take control over Klal Yisrael. This was in the aftermath of the Churban Bayis Sheni, and the authority of Klal Yisrael was becoming very weak. And Gamliel had a principle, Nahoig Nesiyascha Barama. He had a sort of galvanize the Jewish people, and he acted in a very authoritarian way, and people didn't like it. In fact, there were 3 instances where he treated the Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi, Rabbi Yeshua was the Av Bezin. He treated Rabbi Yeshua in a way which people thought was disrespectful. And the Gemara says on the third occasion, someone came into the Beis Medrash and he asked, Tfilas Arvis, is it a Rishus or is it a Chayva? And Rabbi Gamliel expressed his opinion, and Rabbi Yeshua expressed a different opinion. And Rabbi Gamliel did not allow Rabbi Yeshua to sit down, and Rabbi Yeshua standing there. And Rabbi Gamliel continues to give shiur, and people thought that Rabbi Gamliel was disrespecting Rabbi Yeshua. And he said, it's enough. This is already the 3rd time that Rabbi Gamliel is acting like a dictator. We don't want a rabbi as a dictator. We want to tell the rabbi what to do. We'll tell him how to act. We can't take this. So they deposed Rabbi Gamliel. They fired him. So now they have a big shaila. Who are they going to put in his place? The Gemara says to put in Rabbi Yeshua. He's the Baal HaMaisa. Looks like, he's trying to, he staged the whole thing to be able to take over. Should we put in Rabbi Akiva? The Gemara says we can't put in Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva comes from Gerim. He doesn't have this chus avos to protect him. Who are they going to put in? They're going to put in Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria. Why Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria? The Gemara says a few reasons. Number 1, he's wealthy. So wealthy? Rabbi needs to be wealthy? Yeah. This way he doesn't have to butter up to any of the people. No, nobody buys him out. This way he could do what he wants, and he's not beholden to anybody. And number 2, he's the 10th generation from Ezra, and he has his chusim to protect him. So they go to Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria, and they say, Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria, would you like to be Nasi? Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria says, let me ask the boss. Let me ask my wife. So he asks his wife, and his wife tells him, even though you don't know how long you're going to have the job for, it's worthwhile to take the job even for a short amount of time. Okay, then the Gemara says like this. Amrole, she said to him, but there's one problem. It's the Gemara on Daf Chavches, right? Lesla chivarasa, you don't have any white here. Says the Gemara, Hu yoima bar tamni srei shana have. That day he was 18 years old. Israchash le nisa, a miracle happened. Vahadru le tamni srei dari chivarasa, 18 rows of white hair grew in his beard. Hainu dekama Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria Hareani Keven Shivim Shana V'loy ben Shivim Shana. Says the Gemara, why did Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria say I'm like 70 years old, and he didn't say I'm as right? He should have said I'm 70 years old. The answer is he wasn't. He was 18 years old, and a miracle happened, and his beard turned white. So the problem is the Rambam is soiser the Gemara.
Well, the Mishnah wouldn't make sense with that other.
The Gemara says that he was 18 years old. He looked like a young whippersnapper. He had a black beard. And in one night, when his wife said, you don't look old enough for the job, a miracle happened and his beard turned gray. That's not what the Rambam says. The Rambam says that he was such a masmid and he was involved in learning day and night that his beard turned white out of all the agony and all the effort that he put into learning. It was a natural process. The Rambam's saying it was a natural process from his learning. And the Gemara says it was an overnight miracle in order for him to look the part. Right, so it's a stira between the Rambam and the Gemara. The Rambam says it was natural, and the Rambam was certainly known as the naturalist. The Rambam often dismissed miraculous things, and the Gemara says clearly, "Hahu yaima esrachish nisa." Yeah, it seems like no way to answer this stira.
I'm troubled by the fact that they would use the white beard to influence.
Everything, everybody judges everything by the way it looks. Nothing changes.
Well, the Mishnah itself.
Well,
the Mishnah itself says because
Hareani Kiven Shivim Shana. Right. Right.
It seems like there is a correlation. The fact that he was 50, 70. Now, if he was 18, there would be no significance that he would be zechish to say Yitzias Mitzrayim. I mean, he's
I mean, the fact that a miracle happened and he looked old overnight would have nothing to do with the fact that would be not connected to the point that he never had the merit because he's a young guy who life just began for him. He's saying the Rambam's explanation of the Mishnah that he's like a venerable sage would be more connected to his explaining that he still never had this chus. I hear. But Lamais, what the Rambam's saying is still soiser the Gemara, right? Got the stira? Okay, so there's a Chasam Sofer. Chasam Sofer can be found in many places. It's in the Haggada Chasam Sofer, it's in the Igroi Sofrim, and it's also in the Torah Moshe HaShalem. With Torah Moshe HaShalem has all the editions of the Chasam Sofer, Madura Shniya, Madura Chlisoi, Madura Reviyoi, and in Parshas Chayisara, the Chasam Sofer is bothered by this kasha. Okay? It says like this. It says the Rambam in the Parsha Mishnayis that Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria grew 18 rows of white hair. So the Rambam says Shezeh ba'loi b'teva. This was a natural process al yidei iyunoi tamid through his constant analysis, through his constant learning. It says the Chasam Sofer Chvar Amarti the Divrei Haramam Halalu Einon Soisrim Divrei Talmudenu. The Rambam's not a stira to our Gemara Shenasa Loines that a miracle happened. You know why? Listen to what the Chasam Sofer says. Says Chasam Sofer, really, every Talmud Chacham, every tzaddik, anybody who learns Torah, he should look like he's 90 years old when he's 30 years old. Because Torah is mateshes koicha shel adam. Really, they had a meeting last night, the first meeting of the year of all the Rabbanim. So, it used to be most Rabbanim here in the neighborhood, they were in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Now, most of them are in their 30s. So you have all these young Rabbanim. Says Chasam Sofer says, really, somebody who learns Torah, he should look like he's 90 years old. Torah is mateshes kocha shel adam. Elamai, that's the way it should be naturally. Hashem makes a miracle that even though really Torah should weaken you and make your hair turn white and sap you of your energy, v'koyeh Hashem yachalifu koyach, the Hashem makes a miracle that you remain vigorous and you remain fresh and you have vitality, despite the fact that really Torah should be sapping you of all your strength. So really it's a miracle that Talmidei Chacham don't look 90 years older than they are. Comes Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria, and Hashem made a miracle on top of a miracle. Really, by all Talmidei Chacham, Hashem should allow them to continue to look young. Comes Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria, he needed to look older because he just became the Nasi. So Hashem made another miracle. He overrided the regular miraculous process, and he allowed Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria to look old, even though miraculously Talmidei Chacham usually do not look old. So the Rambam's not a stira to the Gemara. When the Gemara says miraculously Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria looked old, he did miraculously look old. When the Rambam says Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria looked old naturally, he did look old naturally. The reason why he looked old, even though he was only 18 years old, is because all of his learning made him look old. So why does the Gemara say it was a miracle? Because normally, miraculously, you should look young. Comes Rebbe Glatstein and Azaria, and Hashem overrode the regular miraculous process, and he made another miracle that Rebbe Glatstein and Azaria should be different, and he should look old. That's how the Chassam Sofer answers up this stira between the Rambam and the Gemara.
I mean, he didn't have to perform another miracle. He just drew the original miracle.
Okay, maybe he did, but that's also called Darach Nes. Since there's a system of miracles for all the Tamei Chachamim, I hear. Okay, fine. Let's move on to something halach l'maisa. So we have machlokes here, whether when Mashiach comes, there's going to be a mitzvah of zechiras yitzias Mitzrayim. Ben Zoyma, Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria says no. Ben Zoyma, Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria says kol yimei chayacha is lahavi halelos, is to include the nights. And the Chachamim say no, kol is not to include the nights, kol is to include limos hamashiach. So let's see a little Gemara here, and then I want to point out something very interesting. It says the Gemara, Tanya Amar Lahem Ben Zoyma l'Chachamim. Ben Zoyma says to the Chachamim, how could you say such a thing? V'chi maskir yitzias Mitzrayim limos hamashiach. Are we going to talk about Yitzias Mitzrayim when Mashiach comes? V'aloi kfar ne'amar, doesn't it say in Yirmiyah, Hine yamim ba'im no Hashem. By the way, this is not Shlomo Karbach talking, it's another Yirmiyah. Hine yamim ba'im no Hashem. Days are coming, says the Lord. You're not going to say, by the life of Hashem who took us out of Mitzrayim, Ki im chai Hashem, asher he'ela, ba'asher hevi, ezera beis Yisrael, me'eretz Safina. You're going to say Hashem who took us out of the north, whom we call our Ratzis, and from all the lands. We're going to say Hashem who took us out of America, Hashem who took us out of Europe, Hashem who took us out of all the 7 continents, asher hidachtem sham, that you were cast there. So we see from the Navi Yirmiyah that when Mashiach comes, Yitzias Mitzrayim is really negligible. It's really not that important. We're not going to say Hashem who took us out of Mitzrayim. We're going to say Hashem who took us out of our current galus. So how could you Chachamim say that when Mashiach comes, we're still going to mention Yitzias Mitzrayim? Amrulai, they said to him like this: Loi shet heyakar Yitzias Mitzrayim mimakaima. Not that Yitzias Mitzrayim will be completely uprooted. Ela shetehei shibud malchios ikar v'Yitzias Mitzrayim tafalai. The main mention will be the fact that Hashem took us out of the current galus. Yitzias Mitzrayim will be secondary. It won't be disappear. It won't vanish. It will be of secondary importance. Primary importance will be the fact that Hashem took us out of the current galus. Secondary, so the Chachamim say, Avada, there's going to be a mitzvah of Yitzias Mitzrayim, Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim when Mashiach comes. It will be secondary to the primary mitzvah of Zechiras Yitzias America. The Iker Simcha, the Iker mitzvah will be Zechiras Yitzias America. Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim will be Tafel. But Ben Zoyma says no. Elazar ben Azaria says no. There will be no mitzvah of Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim when Mashiach comes. Ki yotzibay ata omer. Another similar analogous machlokes. Gemara says, "Lo yikra shimcha oid Yaakov, ki yim Yisrael yeshemech." Right? Hashem tells Yaakov Avinu, "Your name will no longer be Yaakov. Your name will be Yisrael." So the Gemara says, "Lo Yaakov Yaakov." It's not that Yaakov is not a name at all, right? It's not that Yaakov is not a name at all. Elosh Yisrael Ikar v'Yaakov Tavle. The main name is Yisrael. Yaakov is secondary. So too, the Yitzia from the current galus will be the Iker. The Yitzia from Yitzias Mitzrayim will be the Tafel. This is the analogy that the Chachamim are advancing to Ben Zoyma and Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria. So very interesting. If you look in the Rambam, in the Sefer HaMitzvos, right? The Rambam has a tradition, as do all the Ma'anei HaMitzvos, of 613 mitzvahs. The Rambam lists one of the 613 mitzvahs, the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, the night of Pesach. Okay? Everybody knows Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. And strangely, the Rambam lists the mitzvah of Kriyas Shema. He does not list that there's a mitzvah of Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim. The Rambam omits the mitzvah of Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim. What's the pshat?
It's every night.
So it should be one of 613 mitzvahs. Why does the Rambam omit the mitzvah of Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim? Yeah? What? Oh, very good. So she is saying, this is the kasha of Reb Chaim, okay? For all you briskers out there, there's a famous kasha of Reb Chaim in the Grach. Chaim wants to know, why does the Rambam omit the mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim? So she is saying, very good. We just learned that the opinion of Ben Zayma is that the mitzvah of Sipur of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim will not exist when Mashiach comes. The Chachamim say Kol is Lahavi Yimais HaMashiach. Ben Zayma says Kol is Lahavi Haleilos, but not Lahavi Yimais HaMashiach. That means, according to Ben Zayma and Elazar and Azaria, when Mashiach comes, you will not have to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim every day. Now we know when the Rambam set up the Sefer HaMitzvahs, he has sharoshim of rules that govern what is a mitzvah and what's not a mitzvah. One of the rules of the Rambam is that any mitzvah which does not last forever and ever is not one of the 613 mitzvahs. Says the Rambam, and the Rambam then says Reb Chaim that according to Ben Zayma, now it's a little bit odd that the Rambam would be passing like Ben Zayma over the Chachamim, but according to Ben Zayma and Rabbi Elazar ben Azaria, unless the Rambam is reading the Mishnah like we said, V'loi zachisi, I never prevailed until Ben Zayma came, which would then mean that ultimately Ben Zayma and Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria prevailed over the Chacham, and the Chacham were moided to them. So you'd have to read the Mishnah that way. Zachisi, right? Alasan al Nitzachon, and then could be the Chacham were moided that since according to Ben Zayma and Rebbe Elazar ben Azaria, it will be a mitzvah that will become batal asalava. In the Rambam's third shirish in the Sharashim is that any mitzvah which is not forever and ever is not one of the 613 mitzvahs. Maybe that is why the Rambam omits the mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim. Okay? Got it? Got the rule? Fine. Last night, 11:45, I'm looking around. I need an Even Ezel. I don't have an Even Ezel, Rabbi Zalman Meltzer. I remembered the Even Ezel disagrees with this argument of Reb Chaim. He says this is not a valid reason why the Rambam would omit the mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim. Even according to Ben Zayma, the Even Ezel says to Reb Chaim, you're not understanding correctly what Ben Zayma means, that when Mashiach comes, we're not going to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. Reb Chaim understands it, that right now, it's very significant to a Jew that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. La'asid lavai, it will not be significant at all, we're not going to mention it. No, let's iron that, let's explain that a little bit. Says the Even Ezel, right? You know the Even Ezel? Rabbi Zalman Meltzer. Rabbi Zalman Meltzer was the father-in-law of Rav Aaron Cutler. It says like this. He brings down the answer that we just said from Reb Chaim in the name of his friend Rabbi Cheskel Abramsky. He says, "V'yedidi agan Rabbi Cheskel Abramsky in the Chazon Yecheskel." He writes that according to Ben Zayma, that Kol Yimei Chayecha includes the night and doesn't include Yimei Samashiach. It's a mitzvah shesoifel is batel, and the Rambam doesn't count in the Taryag a mitzvah that's going to be batel. Says the Even Ezel, it's not a good answer. It's like this. There's a mitzvah in the Torah to remember Geula. That's the mitzvah. What does Geula mean? Obviously Geula means a Geula that is significant to us. It happens to be in our existence right now. The Geula that is significant to us is Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's not that the mitzvah is going to become batal. It's the same mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to remember Geula. Elamai, when Mashiach comes, the way that mitzvah translates, the way it materializes is, remember the Geula that's significant then. There's nothing is batal. There's one mitzvah. The mitzvah is, remember Hashem's hashgacha pratas to Klal Yisrael, that when we're in a bind, he's goyal us, he redeems us. So it's not the pshat when Mashiach comes, Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim is batal. Nothing's batal. The mitzvah is Zechiras Geula. Right now, Zechiras Geula translates itself to mean, remember Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Elamai, there's going to be a great day that Yibam Shalom is going to perform such great miracles that Geulas Mitzrayim is going to pale in comparison to the Geula Asad Lavai. Okay, fine. It doesn't mean the mitzvah is batel. It just means the way that we're Mekayim the mitzvah will be in a slightly different oifen. But it doesn't mean the mitzvah is batel, says Rabbi Zalman Meltzer. It's interesting. You know, there are many Moinei HaMitzvahs. You have the Rambam, and then the Ramban, and the Megillas Esther, and the Smag, and the Smak, and the Bahag, and Rav Sadia Goin. There are many. If you look in the Smak, is one of the 613 mitzvahs belief that Mashiach is coming. Pashtus, no. Nobody counts it. Not one of the 613 mitzvahs. To believe that Mashiach is coming. According to the Rambam, it's one of the animamins But Kamat nobody counts that believing that Mashiach will come is one of the 613 mitzvahs. Now the Rambam does say that if somebody doesn't believe Mashiach is coming, loy b'neviim belvad hu koifer ela b'taras Moshe hu koifer. But still, Kamat nobody counts believing Mashiach is coming is one of the 613 mitzvahs. You know why? Because where in the Chumash does it say it doesn't say anywhere that Hashem told us you have to believe Mashiach is coming. Could be it's merumas in the psukim, but there's no explicit tzivoi. Comes the smak. The smak says in the very first mitzvah, the first mitzvah in the Torah is to believe Mashiach is coming. What? Where does it say that? You know what pasuk he marshals? Anochi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzeisecha me'eretz Mitzrayim. That's a pasuk that says you're commanded to believe Mashiach is coming. Huh? That pasuk says, believe that Hashem took you out of Mitzrayim. How does that say, believe that Mashiach is coming? So I think it's a very similar type of idea to the Rebbe Isser Zalman Meltzer. There's no mitzvah believe that Hashem took you out of Mitzrayim. It's a mitzvah believe that when you're Be'ez Tzara, that Hashem will take you out. In other words, believing Hashem took you out of Mitzrayim, the definition of that is not just there was a historical event that Klal Yisrael was subjugated and Hashem took us out. It's a mitzvah that when Klal Yisrael is B'tzara, Hashem takes us out of that matzav. Part of believing that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim is believing that Hashem will take us out of the current galus. It's like flip sides of the same coin. It's part of that mitzvah. So too, says Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer, Ben Zoyma doesn't mean that when Mashiach comes, there's no mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim. There's still a mitzvah to remember Geula. But Geulas are different. Different times in history, different Geulas carry different levels of significance. Okay. Let's move on to a little Gemara, a few lines down, and see how it ties in. You want to say something?
Yeah. The Gemara says Yetzias Mitzrayim tafel.
Yes.
According to this, there's no significance in Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's only that Hashem takes you out of Galus. So there's no.
That's in the shita of the Chachamim.
Right, but
it means the Chachamim are saying. So let's explain it a little bit better. What's the difference between Ben Zayma and the Chachamim? The Chachamim say that when Mashiach comes, the mitzvah of remembering Geula will translate primarily to remembering the Yitzhak from the current Galus, and secondary remembering Hashem to and Mitzrayim. And Ben Zayma would say no, when Mashiach comes, the mitzvah will completely translate into remembering Hashem took us out of the current Galus, and Yetzias Mitzrayim's Geula will not be remembered at all. But everybody agrees there will be a mitzvah of Zechiras Geula. Question is, how will that translate Lamaisa, according to the Chachamim, Shibud Malchios Iker, Yetzias Mitzrayim Tafel, according to Ben Zayma, only Shibud Malchios and not Yetzias Mitzrayim at all.
It doesn't make sense to remember where we came from.
Look, a lot of things make sense. It's the Torah is divinely given. Hashem.
That's with our founding. That's all.
Good. So, according to the Chachamim, there'll still be a mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. There'll still be mitzvahs. In other words, let's say it's tefillin. When the Torah says Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim, will that be batal? No, that won't be batal. But as a specific mitzvah of remembering it in and of itself, that aspect of it will be batal. The Gemara goes down further and talks about the name of Avram, and you'll see what this has to do with anything. The Gemara in Yud Gimel says like this, like 10 lines down. Avram, in Divrei Hayom, he's called Avram. Who Avraham? He's the same guy, Avraham. Betchila nasa av la'aram. First, he was the father of Aram only. Ulevasleif nasa av l'chol ha'olam kulay. And then he became the father of the whole world. Sarai, he's Sarah. Betchila nasa Sarai lu'masa. At first, she was a princess for her nation. Ulevasleif nasa Sarah l'chol ha'olam kulay. Tani bar kapara. Kol ha'koire le'Avraham. Avram over basei. Anyone who calls Avram, is over mitzvah sasei dairaisa. Shenemar v'haya shimcha Avraham. Then Rebbe Elazar says he's over alav v'lo yikra oida shimcha Avram. So Bar Kapara is saying, right? Bar Kapara is the Talmud of who? Of Rebbe. Bar Kapara says anyone who calls Avram, is over Naseh. It's interesting if you look, the Rabbi Kiva brings down, if you look in the Magen Avram, it's in Kuf Nun Vav, he brings down this Gemara Lamaisa, that if you have anyone who refers to Avraham as Avram, is over Naseh. Comes a Noda B'Yehuda, Noda B'Yehuda wants to know, what? Over Naseh? So how come nobody says this? You can look in the Rambam doesn't bring it down. You can look in the Rif, you can look in the Rosh, you can look in any of the Money mitzvahs. Nobody brings down that Kol HaKorei Avram is over Naseh. Only the Magen Avram happens to bring it down. None of the Money mitzvahs bring it down. Like how do they just overlook the whole Gemara? Why doesn't anybody say this? Why doesn't anybody say Kol HaKorei Avram who over Baseh? Not mentioned in any of the classic Rishonim. So Noda B'Yehuda says like this, and also this is not completely against Reb Chaim, completely not like Reb Chaim that we said. Noda B'Yehuda says, who do we paskin like? Ben Zayma, who says that Yetzias Mitzrayim will be batal asalavai, or do we paskin like the Chachamim? Avada we paskin like the Chachamim, right? Not like Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim said we paskin like Ben Zayma. We paskin like the Chachamim. That what? That when Mashiach comes, we're not gonna. We will mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. There will be a mitzvah of Zechias Yetzias Mitzrayim when Mashiach comes. We paskin like the Chachamim. Yachid v'Rabim, halach karabim. Says in the here, what's this Gemara got to do with the price of tea in China? What's the Gemara bringing in Avraham and Avram? We're talking about remembering Yetzias Mitzrayim when Mashiach comes in. Now you're talking about Avraham's name. What's the Hemshach HaGemara over here? Why does the Gemara bring this in? Says in Noda B'Yehuda, this Gemara is exactly parallel to Machlokes Ben Zayma and the Chachamim. The same way Ben Zayma and the Chachamim say that, when a bigger miracle happens, the question is, does the smaller miracle get pushed aside completely, or does it just remain secondary? It's the same thing with Avram and Avraham. You have somebody by the name of Avram. He was the father of Aram. Then Hashem says, forget Aram, you're the king of the world. So now the shaila is he now only Avraham? Or is he also Avraham? You can make the case, okay, he's the king of the world, but he's also the father of Aram. He didn't stop being the father of Aram. Or do you say, no, why would you call him the father of Aram? He's the father of everybody. So it says in Noda B'Yehuda, the same way the Chachamim and Ben Zayma will argue whether Yetzias Mitzrayim will be Nisaker Legamri or it will just be Tafel. They will argue about the shame Avram. Is Avram completely out of the picture, or is it secondary? So what would the Chachamim paskin? Chachamim would say, just like when Mashiach comes, you'll still remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. It will be of secondary importance. Same thing with Avram. When Hashem came to Avram and they said, but your name is Avraham, Avram didn't go into the garbage. Avraham is still his name. It's only secondary. Bar Kapara, who said, he's going according to Azaria and Ben Zoima, who says that Yetzias Mitzrayim is out the window, and so too Avram is out the window. But the Chum disagree. They say Yetzias Mitzrayim is not out the window. So they're going to say Avram's not out the window either. V'mela, none of the Rishonim bring down the halacha of Kol HaKorei Li Avram, Oiver, Ba'aseh. This is a very interesting cheshbon that the Noda B'Yehuda has, that really these Gemaras exactly parallel each other, and that's why halach l'maisa, the same way we paskin like the Chachamim of Lahavi, Yemais HaMashiach, we paskin not like Bar Karpara, and you could call Avram. That's the goinistic pshad of Bar Karpara. It's interesting, if you look in the Baal HaTurim, we'll just end with this. If you look in the Baal HaTurim, there's an idea that the Gula Hasida, this concept of that we're trying to bring out from the Smak, that there is that part of the mitzvah of Anochi Hashem Lekecha Asher Yitzisicha Meretz Mitzrayim. Part of the mitzvah of believing in Yetzias Mitzrayim is believing in the Gula Asad Lavai. That there's one mitzvah, the belief in Geula, the belief in the Geula from Mitzrayim, belief in the future Geula. If you look in Rabbeinu Bechaye, he writes in at least 5 Makayimos that all of the miracles that happened in Mitzrayim were a predecessor for the miracles of L'Asad Lavai. In other words, we know there's a famous concept of Masei Avos Siman Labanim, right? That whatever Abraham did created what would happen to us. So Rabbeinu Bechaye writes in many, many places, based on the pasuk of Ki Meitzeischa Me'eretz Mitzrayim Arenu Neflais, that all the miracles that happened in Mitzrayim were the predecessor, were the pre-enactment, and created the miracles that will happen l'asad lavai. In fact, Rabbeinu Bachai writes, Dvarim Noiran. He says that Eser Makos was just practice for the Eser Makos of before Mashiach comes. Kriyas Yamsuf was just practice for the real Kriyas Yamsuf l'asad lavai. He even goes as so far as to say, before we enter Eretz Yisrael, we're going to be Far Darben in the Midbar, they're going to be Membeis Masois. Everything that we read in Sefer Shemais is also Masei Avos Simon Labanim to the Gula Hasidah. Rabbeinu Bachai writes in many, many places. There's a lot about this. There's going to be a Makas B'chayros, there's going to be Dam, Rabbeinu Bachai says there's going to be Tzfardeya, there's going to be Kinim, there's going to be Arav, all the Makas, all the Nisim are going to replay themselves. So it gives an added dimension to the idea of the Smak, that belief in Yetzias Mitzrayim, part and parcel of that is belief in the Gula Hasidah, because it's not two different events. Yetzias Mitzrayim was the predecessor. Yetzias Mitzrayim created the Gula Achroina, right? The Leil Seder, the whole Leil Seder, you're Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim. What's Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim got to do with anything? Why mention Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim? You don't say Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim after Megillas Esther. You don't. That means the Anshe Knesset, whoever wrote the Haggada, put in the Haggada Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim. I mean, the second half of the Haggada is all about the Gula Hasidah. What's it got to do with anything? It's a very nice night to remember what happened 3,300 years ago. What's it have to do with the Gula Hasidah? The answer is everything that happened in Mitzrayim is creating. It's a Masay Avos Simon Labanim that creates a Gula Hasidah. So we're preparing ourselves. We're preparing ourselves to the Seder, the Leil Seder. The Ramchal writes, the Leil Seder creates the Geula, because by reliving Yetzias Mitzrayim, we're going through the Maisim. It's a Payal Demyoni. Chayadim says that Leil Rosh Hashanah. Right? What's Pshat the Simanim? Give me one more minute. What's Pshat the Simanim? Leil Rosh Hashanah. You say you eat a sweet apple, and you say Lashana Tova Yiratzain. What's the lesson again? Thank you. I'm out of Rosh Hashanah. I'm still in Purim, right? Shana Tova Masuka. Give me a break. Hashem's sitting up there in Shemayim. He's deciding whether we should have a good year or not. And you're telling me if I eat a sweet apple, I'm going to have a better year. He's looking at my maisim. He's looking how I daven. He's looking how I learn. And you're telling me if I eat a sweet apple, it's going to affect my year. You're telling me don't eat a bitter food. I'm going to have a bad year. Come on. Chayadim says that from the Ramban, that the way Gezeros work from Shamayim is that when you do a Maisa, when you do a Payal Demyoni, when you do a Maisa, it causes the Gezerah to materialize. It causes it to come down. You see, for something to come down from Shamayim, from all the from the Ilamas Alyonim, for it to trickle down through all the various Ilamas down to this world, there's a lot of Ilamas that has to pass through. When we do a Maisa, the Maisa concretizes the Gezerah. So the Rebbeinu Shem decreed that we should have a sweet year. By eating the sweet apple, it causes the Gezerah to actualize more. Same thing the Ramchal says the night of the Seder. The Rebbeinu Shem is looking to utilize Yetzias Mitzrayim as a paradigm, as a pre-enactment of the future Geula. By us going through the Maisim of the Seder and reliving Yetzias Mitzrayim, Chayiv Adam Lirisas Atzma Kiliyatzim Mitzrayim, that's the Poyel Demyoni, that's the Maisa that will actualize and cause to materialize Mertz Hashem. The Gula Hasidah, we should be Zoicha to see of Him Her Yamim.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.